Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Let's jump right into the video. Fist of frickin' legend. Hell yes, Jet Li. This is the 88 film's release. Now, something you will notice is that this is not the hard shell case version. I did not get the 4K version because I don't have a 4K player, and I've talked about that extensively on the channel before, so we don't need to go into that right now. But I just got the standard Blu-ray edition, and for a while, 88 Films was doing this thing where they were I think this lasted for maybe just a couple months because they stated at some point over the summer that they're not doing this anymore. The 4K versions were getting really fancy releases with booklets, posters, hardshell casing, everything like that. And the Blu-ray, standard Blu-ray was kind of a more standard slipcase type of situation, which is what I have here. I'm not disappointed with this. I'm happy to own this movie on Blu-ray. I love this movie. I was very excited when they announced that it was coming out. This is probably a top 5 Jet Li movie for me. I say probably because it might even be top 3. My favorite Jet Li movies are My Father is a Hero, which was recently released by Eureka on that Jet Li 3-pack, so I've reviewed that recently, and you know I love that movie, directed by Corey Yuen. It's a great film, Anita Mui is in it. I could go on and on about that movie, but I won't, because I already did, and you can go watch my video on it. The two Once Upon a Time in China movies, the first two, I have not seen the other ones in that series, and I have not seen the first two in like 20-something years. I saw them in like 2001, 2002. I haven't watched them since then. And I have the Eureka freaking box set, and I haven't watched them. I know I really need to revisit them. And then this one. So I have like kind of 4 favorite. That's my Mount Rushmore. There you go. Of Jet Li films. And this is definitely on there. And this is also a film that just looms very large, like in my mind, because as I was getting into Hong Kong cinema, kind of like late 90s, early 2000s, this was a film that I saw around a lot, that I saw referenced a lot, that a lot of people would talk about as being one of Jet Li's best films. And so it's kind of just like in my mind has this kind of larger than life kind of mythology around it. And it's a very big film from my perspective to the fan culture. And I think easily one of Jet Li's best films, if you're just looking at its qualities as a film. This is very much a prestige film, which is something that was really interesting to me in revisiting it. Like, it's extremely well directed. It's very well written. The cast is incredible. The sets are amazing. The cinematography is great. The editing is really, like, all of the craft aspects of this film are phenomenal. And this is like a very high level, like, prestige film. It's actually really interesting because it's a really well-made, character-driven drama, but it also has just incredible fight scenes in it. So it's like this weird, it's almost like this weird hybrid of like a really, really good martial arts film and like a really good prestige drama. It's like these two things happening simultaneously. Gordon Chan directed this film and was one of the writers on it as well. There were 3 screenwriters altogether. It was released on December 22nd, 1994 in Hong Kong. A martial arts choreography by Yuen Wu-ping. So this is what I'm saying. Like, this is a prestige film, right? Jet Li is in it. Yuen Wu-ping doing the choreography. Chin Sui-ho is in it. Yasuaki Kurata, Billy Chow, Paul Chun, Shinobu Nakayama. You'll recognize so many people in the cast, and their performances are really strong, like very high level. And this is just a movie that looks phenomenal. What I want to talk about with this film, and there's also a buttload of bonus material on here, which I'll show off the physical release in just a second. And it's, if you're unfamiliar with the film, I guess I should say up front in the review, this is a remake of a Bruce Lee film. And it's a very famous story about a guy from China who is in Japan studying. And so I'll just read you what it says here. Stunning reinvention of Bruce Lee's timeless 1972 classic Fist of Fury. So Chen Zhen is the character who Jet Li plays, and he's from a prominent kung fu school in Shanghai, a martial arts school, I should say, in Shanghai. And he's in Japan at a university studying, and this is when the wars started, the Sino-Japanese War between China and Japan, which was the Pacific theater of World War II, eventually when all the conflicts joined together. This is when that's kind of beginning. And and it's actually very interesting because there's a lot of kind of racism and condescension from Japanese characters towards Chinese characters, and yet at the same time, there are a number of Japanese characters who stand against that and say, we don't believe in that, and that's BS, and we hate this kind of nationalistic wing of the government and of the youth that is taking over the country, and we don't agree with this treatment of your people, and we don't want to invade. It has kind of a nuanced portrayal of, which is interesting because in a lot of films of this nature where there is an element of the enemy is from another country. They are trying to destroy us. Our folk heroes stand up and beat them, right? This is a trope that you see in a lot of these films. In a lot of these types of movies, it's a very one-dimensional portrayal of who the characters are. And in this movie, it's a very three-dimensional, nuanced portrayal of people on both sides. So Chen Zhen's his master dies, his Sifu, like his martial arts instructor, who is kind of like his adopted father as well. So he goes back to Shanghai, and his adopted brother, who's the son of his master, has taken over like the martial arts school. And then it turns out that he was killed in a battle with a Japanese karate master who's at a Japanese kind of dojo nearby. And the plot kind of evolves from there. So let me show you this is from the final fight in this film, which is Billy Chow versus Jet Li, which I think is one of the most famous fights of 90s Hong Kong cinema and that kind of era in general in action cinema and martial arts cinema. Here's the back, and then we pop it. I really like this artwork, so I did not reverse the artwork because I just think this is really freaking cool. And shout out to, I just want to make sure I get it right. Who did, is this, this is Sam Green did the new artwork here. And then here's the disc. So shout out to Sam Green, because I don't actually know I don't know what other releases I have that have artwork by Sam Green, but I really like this artwork. And then here you have the original poster. There. So like I said, physically it's a relatively bare bones release, though you do get the slipcase. But to tell you what's on here in terms of bonus material, there's you get the Cantonese mono, alternate Cantonese mono, optional English subtitles, audio commentary with Hong Kong film expert Frank Jenk, hell yes, a look at Fist of Legend, which is kind of like a behind-the-scenes documentary type of thing, interview with actor Chin Sui Ho, interview with director Gordon Chan, interview with actor Yasuaki Kurata, karate seminar with Yasuaki Kurata, deleted scenes, theatrical trailer, and then the reversible sleeve art stuff. So there's a lot of material on here. And it's a very good release for a very classic, fantastic film. And I've heard the 4K looks really, really good too. I haven't seen it, obviously, because I don't have a 4K player. But there was something particular that I wanted to talk about with this movie upon rewatching it. The last time I watched this movie, I think, was like 2014, 2015. It's been about 10 years. This is probably like the fourth or fifth time I've seen this movie. Fun story. I watched this movie in Spanish once, dubbed in Spanish, and I honestly don't remember the context of it. I think it may have been when I was living in Mexico, and I found like a DVD of it at like a market. It was probably a bootleg DVD, and I bought it not thinking about the fact that it would probably be in Spanish, and it was, and I just watched it in Spanish. So I think like fourth or fifth time I've seen this movie, but the first time I've seen this movie since graduating from film school. I went to film school for screenwriting, and then I read scripts and was a freelancer like in the industry for a bit. And I've been thinking a lot about writing, screenwriting, story structure, those types of things, the craft of screenwriting recently, because I just finished writing a script with a friend of mine who's a director, and that as of my filming this movie, that movie is currently in production in Mexico City. So more news on that coming soon. I'm really, really excited for lots of reasons, and I don't have a lot to say about it right now because, like I said, it's still in production, and but I've seen some images and some clips from it, and it looks awesome, and I'm really excited. Anyway, that being neither here nor there, I started working on that script with the director, I think in March or April, and we finished it late July. So I spent 4 months doing that. And then, as I'm recording this, it's August of 2024. So just like a month ago, we finished it. And then I'm also in the editorial process on a novel that I wrote, working with the publishing company, having like regular meetings every couple weeks, like an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours, where we talk about like the nitty gritty of like story mechanics. And like, I'm sorry, I have like a terrible haircut right now. My hair is like driving me freaking nuts. I'm sorry, I keep like playing with it, but it's just driving me crazy. So I'm like kind of like deep in this place where I'm thinking a lot about story mechanics, story structure, storytelling devices, and not only how they work in and of themselves, but how they work in relationship to the audience. And so I want to talk about a very specific element of this film. Now, if you've never seen this film before, or if you're not particularly interested in me talking about these things, what do you really need to know about this film? It is a classic movie. It is one of my favorite Jet Li movies. It is an incredibly well-made movie. It has amazing fight scenes. It's basically like Ip Man before Ip Man, right? Like that. I mean, obviously you can trace these films back to Bruce Lee, and even I think Sanjiro Sugata Part 2 the Kurosawa film has it's kind of a similar set. Doesn't it have a similar setup where there's like people invading Japan and he has to use his judo to beat them up as like the national folk hero, right? So like these movies go back to like the 40s and probably even before that. But if you're looking at the tradition of Hong Kong cinema, right, you have Fist of Fury, which is this hugely influential film with this very much like a point of pride of, you know, Bruce Lee wanting to make a film with like a Chinese folk hero who was standing up against people who were denigrating their culture and their traditions and stuff like that, right? And then you carry that over into a film like this, and then Ip Man has very similar themes and a very similar setup in the same historical period and stuff like that, right? So there's this kind of lineage and this continuum of these films. But it's a phenomenal movie, and if you're a fan of Hong Kong cinema, martial arts cinema, international art house dramas even, because this is a very good drama, I would say see this movie. As a writer, this is specifically what I wanted to talk about in this review that I found so interesting about this film upon revisiting it. And I want to ask I kind of think there's two competing thoughts in my mind as to why the film is this way. And I want people to give me their thoughts in the comments about this. This is a film with a very well-written script that establishes enormous amounts of drama and potential for disaster. So the Chen Zhen character he's in Japan. He's fallen in love with a Japanese woman. He has to leave her to go back to Shanghai. So right away you have the conflict of their nations are about to go to war. There's all this racism towards the Chinese in Japan. And so she's in love with him, potentially facing, you know, backlash from her society. And he's in love with her, potentially facing backlash from his society in terms of being in love with like someone who's a member of like this invading nation, right? And then he goes back home, so he doesn't even see her, right? When he gets back home, and I don't want to spoil like plot particulars, but essentially he pisses off this guy who's like his adopted brother through not adhering, because he's kind of arrogant and he doesn't think a lot about his actions. He just acts, right? That's his character. Because he does these things, he acts in such a way that causes his adopted brother, the son of his master who has died, to lose face and to also be questioned by his own students and by his community. So that creates conflict between these two, basically brother type of characters, best friends, whatever you want to call them, right? And then you have the obvious conflict of like the Japanese being invaders who are in China and having a stronger military force and a kind of oppressive fascist presence, right? So everywhere this character turns, there's opposition, there's conflict, there's personal conflict, romantic conflict, physical conflict, political conflict, social conflict. Like all of it's happening, right? But what I find so interesting about this film is that the character is never in a place where you worry about him. He never gets upset. He never like breaks down. He never feels like he's losing grip of reality. It's like he never has to make these choices. He does have to make choices, and the choices are very difficult, but you never see him struggle with the difficulty of the decision. And he never has his back up against the wall, and you never feel like everything is going to fall apart for him. There's never that, you know, like in a lot of screenwriting books and classes you'll take, there's this idea of like the all is lost moment, where there's the moment where it seems that the protagonist has lost everything and cannot come back and cannot accomplish their mission and achieve their emotional arc, and everything is just falling apart and they're just completely screwed, right? You never have those dark moments with the character. Right? You have them happening in the world. You see dark things happening. He has to make very difficult decisions. He alienates himself from people he really cares about. At one point, he literally is essentially exiled from his community and his society, right? But it never really bothers him that much. And it never seems like he's not going to come back from it. He never seems in real danger, either physically or emotionally. And there are two reasons that I kind of come into my head of like why this is happening. And I'm curious what people think about this. But it's so interesting that in a prestige film of this nature that is so well made, with such a well-written script with all of these conflicts, you never feel the conflict. It's almost like this passive experience of you are watching a character face conflict, but never succumb to it and never feel victimized or put upon by it. So here are my two kind of things. Is it inherent to who Jet Li is, right? Because I love Jet Li as an actor. I think he's really underappreciated as an actor. And I've only really realized this within the past, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, how much I like Jet Li as an actor. His energy, his presence. He's very enigmatic and he's kind of stoic. He's very internalized. But he's not, you know how some people are like, you can't tell if they're internalized or there's just nothing in there, right? They're just like these empty vessels. With Jet Li, you can see the turmoil. You can see all of the emotions. He gives you the character through his eyes, through his body language, through things like that, right? But he internalizes a lot of it. So is it Jet Li's like stoic, almost like Buddha-like demeanor and the kind of inherent dignity, that he brings to his characters? Like, is that the reason why there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of conflict in this film? Because the way he plays the character doesn't allow that conflict to show, because he deals with it with dignity and certainty rather than allowing it to plant uncertainty in his brain and to break him down. Or is it written that way on purpose because of Chen Zhen, because of that character, because of Bruce Lee, because of that lineage, and because of the idea of like this character needs to be the embodiment of dignity, strength. He's almost like this mythological figure in a way. He's like this cult folk hero who represents the tradition of martial arts, the dignity of the Chinese people, and what they endured at the hands of the Japanese, the way they persevered through that, the way they stood up for themselves, the way they maintained their culture and their history and their society and their dignity through all of that, right? So he's like this totemic figure, right? And he comes from the lineage of Bruce Lee. And so you have to do honor and justice to the legacy of Bruce Lee in portraying this character again, right? So is it what Jet Li brings to the role? Is it this other aspect of it being this kind of totemic character that comes from Bruce Lee? Is it maybe both of those things? I don't know. But I found it so interesting because while I was watching this movie and I'm taking my notes, I'm like, oh, there's this conflict they're setting up in the first scene. There's this conflict. There's this conflict. There's so many conflicts. But he's never in danger emotionally or physically, even as he faces all these conflicts and goes through this crucible of the events of the film. I just thought it was so interesting revisiting this movie after being like deep in the kind of mechanics of writing, and also again, like I said, the way that structuring writing, creating a written piece, but then turning it into a film, right? The way that you use the language of cinema to build the experience for the audience, and this being a more passive experience than an engaging experience, right? So there's less tension here and more like a witnessing of spectacle type of thing. It's almost like obviously it is a period piece, so it's literally in the past, but it's almost like we're watching something in the past tense rather than experiencing it in the present tense. It's a very interesting experience. So it's Fist of Legend. It's a phenomenal film. This is a Region B release from 88 Films. They sometimes do A and B releases, but this is a Region B locked release. But the 4K, I think 4K is naturally region free. So if you buy the 4K and you have a 4K player, you can watch that in whatever region that you are in. But if you are not in Region B, be aware that the Blu-ray release is a Region B locked release. I just love this artwork. It's so fucking cool. Very autumnal. My name is Will. You're watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Let me know what you think about the film and the release in the comments, and we'll see you next time.